Today, we're looking at Diamine Eau De Nil. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Diamine Eau De Nil is a blue ink. And to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into a different pen for a day. I then put it into a cross Bailey with a medium nib to take my notes for this video. Kind of a wet pen, nice to use. Before we get to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is a chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately dunk it in the water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see that this kind of purple pushes all the way up. It's a very consistent tone most of the way up, and then we get this very bright, vivid blue at the top. Now the one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And we see a thick, permanent line at the bottom, which makes me feel that this ink might have a little bit of hold on. But then we get that purple, that very light purple that pushes up, and that same light blue across the top with a much darker blue at the very top of it. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more important, how hard it might be to clean from your pens. Now I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. What we see is the highlighter seems to do pretty good. Yes, it does spread. That extra fine became a medium in terms of its thickness of the line, but it is completely readable. Looking at the water, we see that it reactivates and pulls all of the darkest areas of the ink out, leaving all of that really light blue behind, a little bit of a purpley tinge to it. But it makes me wonder if water's enough. Now, Pen Flush does everything that water did, but pulls a bit more. It is not as dark what's left behind. I'm hoping that Pen Flush is all that would be needed, and seeing how most Diamine inks work, that is likely as far as you would have to go to clean your pens. Bleach completely obliterates. You can see some of the dots through, and you can see a little bit of yellow staining on the edge of where that bleach went away. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Diamine Eau De Nil has a viscosity of 1.79, which certainly makes it a wetter ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper with the extra fine and medium nib. I almost forgot what I use. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Diamine Eau De Nil has an average dry time of 17 seconds, making it not just normal, but average. Now, let's look at the writing samples. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's look at some Clairefontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and yes, it's showing some shading. The extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Plenty of shading throughout this writing sample. It performs very well. 11 seconds to dry. Now the medium, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. A lot of shading within this ink. It is very, very nice how it's shading. To the point that on some letters it's like darker on the two outsides, but it's not a halo because I'm seeing it kind of on the Q, so it's darker on the outsides of the letter than it is on the inside, but it's not a halo. So it's really neat. It's behaving in some interesting ways, making some very interesting tones within the words. 16 seconds to dry. The extra fine scrubby shows us a lot of color variation, and we got it. The medium scrubby shows us a lot of color variation, and we got it. And the smear test says you could likely recover it if you smeared while you were writing. So let's look at Tomoe River. We have no bleeding, we do have ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread. It does have haloing the whole way through. It's all haloed. No sheen, no shade. The extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 18 seconds to dry.
When we go to the medium, we get a darker tone. We have no feather, no spread. We do get haloing on a lot of these words. A lot of them, not all of them. A lot of the words have haloing. No sheen and almost no shade. 24 seconds to dry. When we look at the scrubby of the extra fine and the medium, we see no color variation. We got no real color variation. And the smear test, I don't think you would be able to recover it. There's a maybe there. There's a maybe there. It's showing up a lot more on camera. A lot more on camera than it is in person. So there's your maybe. Use a camera if you smear it. Rhodia paper. It has no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It is showing us some of that shading. That's very nice. The extra fine. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It is giving us the shading throughout the writing. And 13 seconds to dry. Now the medium, a noticeably darker tone. With no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and shading. Now the shading goes from that kind of mid-dark tone to a very dark tone. So it's very lovely. Look at the brown compared to Fox. That's what I see a lot of going on. This is another one of those inks that seems to shade word to word, not within the word itself. 17 seconds to dry. When we look at the scrubby, the extra fine shows us color variation that we get. The medium shows us a little bit here. But again, the color variation we got up here was word to word, not within the same word. And the smear test makes me feel that I could recover it if I did smear it. So I decided to test this out on the yellow Rhodia. We got no bleeding, no ghosting. Let's look at the color variation. A really nice green occurs, which is not a surprise. Yellow and blue make green. A really nice green. If you need blue ink on your yellow paper, this is not the one to choose. But it's a really nice green. And then the tones all follow in form. The extra fine has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shading in this one. The extra fine has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It does show shading throughout the writing and in some of the words. In over, it's much lighter to much darker. The jumps goes from lighter to darker. So it's very nice. 13 seconds to dry. The medium, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Yes, we are seeing shading. We're seeing that shading goes from the mid-dark tone to a very dark tone again. And we do get some of it within the words. I'm seeing it on the, where it got a little lighter and darker and lighter again. I see it some in dog, where the top of the D and then the long part of the D, different. I'm going to go ahead and stop right there. I'm going to let you all make your jokes about me talking about the D. Ignoring where I put my thumb, the 7 of 17 shows some very nice shading within that letter. 17 seconds to dry, so it's giving some nice shading within where we didn't have it on the yellow. So the extra fine shows us color variation, which we got. The medium shows us almost no color variation, but we did get it up here. It's just going from that dark medium tone to a dark tone. The smear test says I could likely recover it if I smeared it while I was writing. So I tested black and red paper, which I've become a pretty big fan of. I really like how this performs. It does surprisingly well. So I know I've heard a lot of people on the YouTubes talk good things about it. This is good paper. Toothy, but good paper. So if you don't like that super smooth, if you don't like Rhodia because it's too smooth, take a look at the black and red. It has no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. And yes, we are getting the shading here. Tons of it. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. It is showing some of the shading in the darker areas. Where I go over parts in writing twice, like on the K, on the. So when I'm tracing over a line twice, the downstroke on the P of jumps, it's darker. When it's a single pass, it's lighter. So you do get some shading. 8 seconds to dry. The medium, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. Again, just ignore where I normally put my thumb. That's the only spot any shading shows up. 11 seconds to dry. Now on the scrubby, the extra fine shows us a little bit of color variation. You look at the far left to far right, and you can see it. The medium shows us no color variation, and that's what we got in the writing sample. So it's a perfect match that way. The smear test, I believe you could recover this if you smeared while you were writing. And that's all that I have for the writing sample.
Instead of finding inks that look like Diamine's Eau De Nil, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. And I wanted a nice darker brown. I chose Noodler's Rome's Burning because on top of it being a nice light brown, if you try to wash it away, you get this cool purple left behind. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Diamine's Eau De Nil? It's a perfectly good ink, but I'm sorry, for me it's just missing something. I can't put my finger on what it is. There's a something not there. It must be with the tone. I don't know what it is, but this ink says choose a different one to me. But again, there's been nothing wrong with how this ink performed. We just have to make choices about different blue inks, and with so many out there, choose one that screams that you like it. Although blue is not my favorite of inks, so that doesn't help it. Thanks for watching.